Hi, everyone. Welcome. So glad that you're here on this Wednesday morning. My name is Beverly Byer, and I'm the Assistant Director for Pre-Award Services here in Research and Sponsored Programs. And our topic today is grant proposal budgets. This is going to be a high-level overview. And so I ask you to please jot down your questions or drop them in the chat, and then we hope to have some time for them at the end of the session. I want to make sure that we cover all the basics before getting into some of the details that you might be interested in discussing. Can everybody see the presentation slide okay? Everything look good? All right, that sounds great. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. Okay, so budgets give an outline of your project activities. Someone should be able to look at your proposal budget and get a sense of what it is that you want to do, what you are proposing. It's important to know at the outset that you will be accountable for using the funds as budgeted and as agreed with the sponsor. And so when you're putting together a grant proposal budget, there's always going to be an element of estimation. However, we want to make sure that we are being as accurate as we possibly can be because you may need to live with that budget for a long time. And the budget is also part of the proposal review process. And so funders may actually, some of them will look at the budget before they even look at your narrative. They may even start to form some opinions about the project based on the budget. And so if your budget is composed in such a way that you have not too much, not too little, but the right amount of money for what you're proposing to do, that really builds your credibility and you are more likely to receive that funding from the sponsor. If you have even one number that is off too far in either direction, too much or too little, that can kind of raise a red flag and cause the sponsor to begin to doubt whether or not you would be able to complete the project if awarded the funds. And so when you think about getting ready to get started to put together a proposal budget, the project budget really should be driven by your plans, your goals, your objectives, and not the other way around, not I want $100,000. Now, what am I going to do with it? It really should be driven by what it is that you want to accomplish. So, in other words, that proposal budget should be closely linked to the methods section or the activities section of your proposal. So as you're getting ready to get started, it's really critical to go back and reread the funder's guidelines. So whatever the funder or sponsor has given you information about the budget, you want to make sure you take a close look at that. What does the funder allow or not allow in terms of the project budget? And so as you can sense, there are a lot of things to consider. You need to consider the sponsor's guidelines. You also need to consider what does the university allow. As well, we are accountable for following federal regulations, which require that all of those budget items be reasonable, allowable, allocable specifically to the project, and consistently treated across the university. So you can tell this is not something that should be thrown together at the last minute. It's going to be better if you're working in advance. And depending on the sponsor or the funder, it can be difficult to make changes later. So our goal here with the pre-award team is to work closely with you to put together a proposal budget that is going to require minimal adjustments once you get the award. We want to set you up so that you are ready to hit the ground running when you do receive that funding. So as you start to think about what are the parts of a budget, we're always going to be starting with those direct costs. And so what does that mean? Direct costs are the line items that are most clearly and closely linked to the activities in your proposal's methods section. And we're really going to start with the people to do the work. Almost every project has people involved. And so when we talk about project personnel, we're talking about paid ISU staff members. They could be part-time, full-time, temporary. They could be people who are already employed by the university. They could be new employees that we might need to hire. And the way we're going to budget for them is going to be based on their time. And so we most often are budgeting based on the percentage of their FTE or full-time equivalent, the percentage of their time or contract at the university. And so it can be sometimes hard to think about percentages. For some people, it's easier to think about how many hours per week, how many full-time, say, months per year. And we can help you make that conversion from time to percent FTE or from percent FTE back to time. Either way, we're going to be using those numbers to set up your budget for personnel. So what we really want you to think about when you're working on this section of the proposal budget is effort. How much time and effort is it going to take you and members of your team to get the work done? And so it's really important not to underestimate or undervalue time, whether someone else's time or your time, especially if you're going to be the person managing the project. I think it's human nature that we think, oh, I'll get this done in 2 hours, and 8 hours later, you're still working on it. And so the same thing can kind of happen here. Make sure that you're not underestimating time. For each university employee in the budget, we also must include fringe benefits. And so these are items like Social Security, health insurance. For every dollar paid to an employee, there's going to be an additional percentage on top of that that's required for fringe benefits. And so it's going to be, again, calculated based on a percentage. And the percentages you see on this slide by employee category are based on the university's actual expenses. And so it's, as you're putting together this budget, you can see that very quickly the numbers are going to add up. It's common for the personnel section to be 2/3 of the budget. It kind of makes sense. The people to do the work, the expertise to do the work, that's often going to be a lot of what you see in a budget. And so after you've listed the personnel, the fringe benefits, we really want to take a look at the other direct cost items, categories that you might need to include. And so this slide just has examples. What you would actually have for your project, of course, is going to depend on the kinds of activities that are a part of the work that you want to do. And as well, what's going to be included will also be driven by what the sponsor does or doesn't allow. You may have a sponsor that won't ever purchase any equipment, for example. And so you really want to, again, be going back to those guidelines. So accuracy, as I mentioned at the top, is important. You want to go out and actually check prices. What you remember from the last time you traveled 3 years ago, I assure you it's not the same now. And as well, you want to look at the university's travel rates. And so it's important not to just go with a gut feeling about how much something's going to cost, but to actually go and get those numbers. And so and that can, again, can take a little time. So again, back to the hammering that theme of working in advance. So once we have those direct cost categories, the other item that we must include is indirect costs. And so you'll hear different terminology used. IDC, facilities administrative, F&A, overhead, it all means the same thing. Essentially, the university needs to maintain places to do the work, supportive services for the work. So think about HR, human resources, think about our general counsel, think about payroll. All of these offices, all these people need to be working behind the scenes in order to do this project. And so Illinois State University, like a lot of higher education institutions, has a federally negotiated rate agreement. And so we've gone through a long process to establish what are the actual indirect costs associated with different kinds of projects on our campus. And they're listed there on that slide, those percentages. They are based again on the actual cost to the university. So once we've determined which category of project you're working on, whether it's research instruction, off campus, or other sponsored activities, that percentage is going to be applied to most of the items that were in the direct costs, those other two slides that we were just looking at. So there are a couple of items that don't get included in that base for charging indirect costs, and we will help you with that through the budget process. And you'll hear us talk about that MTDC, a modified total direct cost. That's when we've pulled a couple of items out of that base. And this will make a little bit more sense when we look at an example here. So I think it's important to know that when a grant is awarded and there are indirect costs there, some of that money does come back to your college, to your university, to your unit. It doesn't all go to the administrative and facilities offices on campus. It also does come back. And so without indirect costs, and this is an important takeaway, without indirect costs, organizations actually lose money for every grant that they accept because we're not covering the actual costs. These percentages are the actual costs. You may know or have experienced that there are some sponsors that limit indirect costs. And if that's true, if they will only allow 10%, 8%, that should be in a public place. It should be in those guidelines. And then again, we can help you adjust that in the budget template that we're using to work with you on planning the budget. So in addition to indirect costs, another important part of putting together a strong proposal budget is the budget justification, also called the budget narrative. And this is essentially, it's typically a separate document. Sometimes it's incorporated, but often it's a separate document. And this is a place where you are explaining to the sponsor or the funder where the budget amounts come from. This is your chance to, if you do have a number that looks maybe to the average person really high or really low, this is your chance to maybe explain why that is. Your goal is that the sponsor is going to be looking at your budget justification and thinking, oh yeah, this makes sense. They've thought this through. They have a really good plan here for how to use the funds if we, the sponsor, do award them. So how do you go about putting together a budget justification or a budget narrative? You're going to basically look at your budget and then line by line, give a rationale for each item that is there. Explain why it's needed. And you're also going to be including any formulas. So for example, if you have a student working for 10 hours a week for 16 weeks for $15 an hour, you'd actually show that math so that it's clear to the sponsor where that total number that they see in the budget comes from. It's kind of like showing the work if you're doing a math problem. And keep in mind is that, again, as I mentioned closer to the top, that the numbers, that we need to be complying with the university's policies. So for example, if you're, again, including travel, you can't fly first class just because you want to. We need to have the numbers in there that are actually going to be in line with the university's policies and rates. And if you have any events, you want to give specifics. Like if you know you're going to go to a particular conference, give the name, location, dates. The more specific you can be in this document, the more it conveys to the sponsor that you've done your homework and that you're going to be a good steward of the funds, that you have a good plan. Again, it's part of that building credibility in the eyes of the sponsor. And we do have a budget justification template, a new one that we've just revised, and hoping to take a look at that with you here in just a moment. So it's a lot of information, I know. So what is the process? You may be feeling a little bit like, how do I even get started? How do you get started? So step one is for you basically to let us here in pre-award know that you are starting to work on a proposal. And we'd love to hear from you as far in advance as you are thinking that you might want to do something, that you might want to pursue a particular opportunity. So we have a proposal intake form. Again, I can show that here in a minute. Fill that out. If you're having trouble finding it, feel free just to shoot me an email and I will send it to you. And this just gives us basic information about, just very basic information about your project and about the opportunity that you're pursuing. And I'm sorry, PI on the slide there is principal investigator, and of course RSP is us here in research and sponsored programs. And so once we receive that intake form, we will send you back an Excel budget template. It's an internal working document, and it's going to be set up based on the information you've given us about your project team. We're going to look at the solicitation. So example, if equipment isn't allowed, we'll have a note there or have a line through equipment so you'll know. We're going to customize the template to, as much as possible, to your project and to the solicitation. We'll have base salaries in there for any employees that you've let us know. So we're going to provide you with kind of that starting point information. And then when we send that to you, your work is going to be to finish filling it out, to finish drafting that budget, because you know what's required for your project. When you get a grant, you are going to be responsible for spending the funds, managing them, being a good steward of them throughout the project life cycle. And for that reason, it's really important for you to be doing the planning and intimately involved in it from the very beginning. Because again, you may be living with this document for a long time. And so you're going to have questions. We're here for you, and happy to help you. So that's your role, is to kind of get that budget drafted. And we're going to be asking questions always with an eye to trying to improve whatever it is that we're doing and increase our chances of success. We're happy to provide you with resources, point you in the right direction. And then we're really both going to be working together to finalize that internal budget. And the great thing about the internal budget is you can put notes to yourself. This is not something that the sponsor sees. And so it's just a way for us to know, again, that we have a really good plan. And our job then at RSP, after we've been through the full approval process and your proposal is ready to submit, our job will be to make sure that we've got a budget that's actually ready to submit, that is in the sponsor's format, that looks how the sponsor wants to see it. And we'll be doing a final review of your budget relative to the guidelines and what we know about the project, with the time that we have, to make sure things look as good as they possibly can. And so when you're looking at the budget and trying to review, you really want to be, again, looking at the budget with the methods section and making sure that everything that's in the methods section is in the budget, and vice versa. They need to align. It can be great to have a colleague also look at that, because when you've really been working on something for a long time, it can be hard to kind of step back from it. And you're really asking yourself, can we do this work with this money? And hopefully the answer is yes. If not, we still have some more work to do. So reviewers, keep in mind, they want you to be successful. The idea that you might kind of lowball, go in with a low number, and that's going to help you get the award, that isn't necessarily true and can be really damaging in some cases. They want you to be successful. They want to see that you are a realistic person, and that you're going to just be logical about managing the project. This is one of the biggest issues that we see, is people undervaluing their time, kind of wanting to go lower on costs unnecessarily. And again, that can really hurt your credibility and actually hurt your chances of getting the funding. So accuracy is what we're all about. So I see we have just a couple minutes, so I'm just going to take a few just to show you the resources that I've been referring to. So let me stop sharing and share another screen. Okay, can you all see the budget template? Great. So this is a view of what you'll see, what we'll send you. It will be customized to your project. I've put in examples here. Regina Redbird is a faculty member. That's her monthly salary times 9. We escalate by 3%. And so when I was talking about FTE, if she's going to spend 1 month on a project, so 1 month for a faculty member is equivalent to 11%. And you can see that the budget will total that out across a couple years. It will include the correct fringe benefits rate for her. And so we've got academic personnel, students, and here are those direct cost categories. I'm sorry, I'm looking over at the other screen, that I mentioned. And again, you can put notes out here to the side. We've included some links of information to help you. This is where the indirect cost rate is. That modified total direct cost will be automatically calculated for you. So just wanted to show you that. We have a new template on our website, and it errs on the side of being exhaustive. It includes everything you might want to have in there. And so you can just go through and kind of category by category, fill in the information based on the instructions. If there's something that doesn't apply, you can just delete it right out. But we've tried to set you up for success by showing you the level of detail that is really compelling for sponsors and actually may be required by a lot of sponsors. So just wanted to give you a quick look at that. It's just to take you over to our website to kind of give you a sense, if you haven't been lately, as to where you navigate. So we're at research.illinoisstate.edu. And to get to that intake form I was talking about, you'd go over to proposals, and it is right here, proposal intake form. And when you hop over, this is what it looks like. Just asking some basic contact information for you, a little bit about the project, and then you hit submit, and we will get back in touch with you. When you get over here to proposals, and you scroll down on the proposals page, there are different categories here, and under budgets, you can hop over to the budget section, and um, this goes into even more detail than we were just discussing. But right at the top, we have some links to fringe benefits, learn about indirect costs, cost sharing matching, budget justifications, and budget templates are here. So budget justification, it is right there. When you have an opportunity that you're looking at, absolutely, we will work with you. So when you submit that proposal intake form, we're going to send you some initial information, including the template, and including in that is we would love to meet with you. So we are certainly happy to do that. We find it most beneficial to meet with folks who are actively getting ready, actively working on a concrete example. So it's a little bit less hypothetical, but we are happy to do that at any point in the process. Because I think looking at an actual example is when will really trigger a lot of those questions and where that understanding can really deepen about how these concepts are applied. So absolutely, it is not a we send you, you send back, and we're done. It's really an iterative process. There's a lot of back and forth between us and you, and we're happy to meet with you as many times as it takes to within our getting all of our proposals submitted. To get the budget to a place where it's going to be accurate. So there's definitely going to be some back and forth and the chance to ask questions and exchange ideas for sure. We covered the purpose of the budget, the basic elements, the process, and the budget justification. And obviously, there's a lot more we can talk about, but hopefully, you feel like you've come away with a better understanding of those four main things. So, thank you so much. And we look forward to working with you on your grant proposal submissions. We're excited and happy to do that anytime.